Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Job Breakdown. Today we're looking at Summoner in Shadowbringers. Although Summoner had a pretty clunky start in Shadowbringers, in my opinion, it was kind of rough to play and felt like you were trying to draw blood from a stone. Following patch 5.1, I think Summoner is a lot more fun to play. Summoner is a ranged caster DPS. You're going to have your basic Ruin 2. This is a spell you can cast while moving because it has no cast time. Your Eggy Assault actions also don't have a cast time and thus can be used while skating as well. You also will get further Ruin from them, which will give you a cast of Ruin 4, which as you can see, does quite a bit of damage. You still have Ether Flow. It is now used by either Energy Drain or Energy Siphon, granting you 2 stacks that can be expended on either Pain Flare or Fester. Fester is used for your dots, and you get quite a bit of damage on it based on the duration of the dots. Fester, of course, being tied to Ether Flow, is going to be something that you keep your dots up for, although your dots are now doing pretty solid damage on their own, so you're going to want to keep them up anyway. Bane is no longer tied to Ether Flow, which means you can use it every time it's up, basically, to be able to make sure that you're keeping those dots spread around. And Tri-Disaster now has a potency, 300 potency to it, which means that you can Tri-Disaster and Bane as long as it is not currently on cooldown. Your different pets have different abilities as well, and we'll get into each of those after we've gone through Summoner's basic rotation. But your basic rotation as Summoner is going to look a little something like this. Devotion to get that extra damage at the start of the fight. Or if you have a big burst window coming, then you're going to want to hold that Devotion for a little bit. Eggy Assault. Then you get your Aether Flow out. Throw out your Tri-Disaster, which is currently on cooldown for me. But that is when you would use Tri-Disaster. We're going to dot manually instead. A quick Fester, Eggy Assault 2, a Bane to spread it to everything, get the Ruin cast off of there, Enkindle, unless you have, say, a Rogue that's going to give you a Trick Attack window, or a Battle Litany coming up, then you would Pain Flare, followed by your Dreadworm Trance, which will be Ruin 3s, because they're instant cast, up until, using OGCDs around it, of course, up until it is about to run out, and then you will Death Flare. You can then use your Eggy Assault abilities again to get your Ruin forecasts. By this point, Ether Flow should be almost off cooldown again, which would allow you to use another Fester if your dots are still up, if you try Disaster at the right time, or another Pain Flare. Then you summon Bahamut. You cannot use any other Eggy actions while Bahamut is out, but that's okay, because Bahamut will use Wormwave for every one of your individual casts, which means that you want to be using Ruin 2, so that you have instant casts, as well as using Akmord anytime it is off cooldown. Throw on a couple Pain Flares there for extra damage. And then, once Summon Bahamut is gone, if you timed it correctly, your Firebird Tranche could be up. So you can go ahead and summon Phoenix as well. Phoenix allows you to use Fountain of Fire and Brand of Purgatory. Fountain of Fire takes the place of Ruin 3. Brand of Purgatory takes the place of Outburst. Obviously use Enkindle Phoenix just like you would Akmord every time it's off cooldown to maximize your damage. That's the basic rotation of a Summoner, and as you can see, your pet comes back, and you have your Eggy Assaults back again. Before, it was very difficult to pull this off because you were trying to shove more attacks in with more OGCDs, but again, with the changes to Summoner in 5.1, it is far easier now to balance all of this, and honestly, I think a lot more fun. Your individual abilities, as you can see, are pretty useful and all kind of roll into each other. One thing I really like about Summoner is that the abilities take over for each other, so you don't need to have that many. Outburst on its own may not do a lot of damage, but Brand of Purgatory absolutely does, and is super worth it. From there, we'll get into the individual summons themselves. Garuda has Ethereal Slash, which does pretty decent damage. Aerial Slash is not a bad ability at all. And, of course, Grants. Red 4 has Slipstream, which is a ground-based AoE that will continue to damage any enemies that are inside it. If you are a tank, please remain inside with your enemies, or at least keep them inside, and don't run away from it. And then Aerial Blast is a really potent maneuver. Not bad at all. 15k. Titan, when you bring him in, he has Earthen Armor, which gives you a barrier. You can block incoming damage up to 30% of your maximum HP. Not bad at all. There is that barrier. Good for 30 seconds. He also has Mountain Buster, which deals pretty solid damage, 250 to all nearby combatants. Not bad at all. And then his Earth and Fury is a big AoE effect that also leaves a ground-based AoE behind it. So if you are doing AoE pulls, you have Garuda out to Slipstream, and then you pull out Titan for Enkindle, and then bring Garuda back out. For single targets, though, you're probably going to be going with Ifrit. Can, of course, switch them on the fly now, thanks to Shadowbringers. Ifrit has Crimson Cyclone, which does 250 potency to a single target. He also has Flaming Crush. Obviously, again, these are continuing to give Ruination. Flaming Crush, which is an AoE, 250 damage to the first, and has drop-off. Still on charges. And then his Inferno is fire damage with a potency of 300 and has a fire damage dot. So you can have another dot just in the form of Enkindle Inferno through Ifrit. By this, you are continuing to keep up this consistent damage. So even though Summoner's singular individual potencies may be a little bit lower, you are cranking out damage with Summoner, especially in big pools, because of the raw DPS that your dots are doing. We'll get into the bigger summons as well, the trance summons. We'll go ahead and get Bahamut out here, but we're going to continue our rotation while we do, just to be able to keep up the damage. Death Flare, summon Bahamut. Bahamut, again, has Akmorn, which is 650 with drop-off. Very, very potent. And then his Worm Waves, as you can see, hit for quite a bit of damage as well, and they will hit every time that you attack. Bahamut can be a little large, but you can resize him. As you can see, he takes up quite a bit of space. One big annoyance is if you begin to move while casting, he may just not use a Worm Wave, like right there. But one nice thing is that right after he leaves, you get your other pet back. So you don't have to worry about losing out on a pet time and having to resummon one instead of using a different ability. Because they come right back. Then we will bring the Firebird up when Firebird Trance drops right there. Firebird, when she is summoned, gives you a Everlasting Flight, which is a regen over time, and then has the Fountain of Fire for 250 and the Brand of Purgatory for 350 with drop-off. And then, of course, Enkindle Phoenix is also 650 with drop-off. Between the two of those are your big burst windows. You're going to be doing quite a bit of damage. And then your dots are attacking the entire time. So, Summoner is actually really potent. It's not as single-target potent as, say, a Black Mage or a Samurai. But if a Summoner is keeping their dots up and maximizing the usage of their trances, they're putting out quite a bit of damage. Not to mention the fact that a Summoner is very mobile. Very few of their abilities require long cast times. Most of them they can skate around, so they don't have to worry about trying to turret in the way that a Black Mage or a couple other classes might. So, honestly, I think that Summoner is probably my favorite caster right now. Black Mage is really solid, and I like it a lot. But Summoner just feels so good after 5.1. Before 5.1, I absolutely would have said it was Black Mage, but I think Summoner is in a really good spot right now. The only thing that I would ask for is maybe, yet again, squish a couple more buttons. Give me the Trance buttons, or, say, Death Flare. Make it the same as Akmorn or Enkindle, so that those two buttons are the same as well, and then we're good to go. I think that solves all of my big issues. For the rest of your abilities, of course, we already talked about Ether Pack for Devotion. It gives you that extra damage. Definitely want to make sure you're using it. You have, of course, your roll actions in the form of Lucid Dreaming, giving you extra MP. Regeneration. Then you have Addle, which will lower target intelligence mind. You should be taking Surecast, which allows you to get the cast off even if you get interrupted. And Swift Cast, which allows you to instant cast anything you were about to try and cast. Very good for getting in quick Ruin 3s. Since that's one of the few things you have that actually has a cast time. Then you have your various 3 summons, as we talked about. You have a Physic. It doesn't heal for a lot, but it's there, and it's instant, so, like, why not, you know, in the middle of your trances, and then afterwards it's got a really short cast. But it's not super worth it to me. It's very weak. You have it if you need it. And then you also have a Resurrection that can be used to bring people back. Summoner's Resurrection is probably the thing that I think gets forgotten the most on the class. But it's really solid. having that extra resurrection to be able to throw out, and you don't use a lot of MP for most of your attacks. So as long as you're using Lucid, you will have the MP to res people. So why not res them? I think most people just assume that if the healers are down, it's the red mage's job to pick them up. But summoners can do that job as well. And again, during your trances, you have instant cast on everything else. So it's really only resurrection that you would want to use swift cast on during your trance. With all that said, though, let me know your thoughts on Summoner in the comment section down below. I have been Trey. This has been the Full Spectrum. And remember to always enjoy the full spectrum that Summoner has to offer.